Okay.
Okay, I think you're.
All right. And so it's
I'll try to share the
now
screen.
showing
Hey, Laura.
this, which is good, I think.
No, this one is really helpful. So I did not want to do this one online.
It works.
Okay, great, great. So maybe what I'll do is, let's see. I don't want to ruffle any feathers here, but
There's a little bit of delay. So
is there, okay, because I was wondering if there's a way to like toggle back and forth between, there we go. I could do like, whoa, that's what you were talking about. Hold on. Okay, there we go. So I'll do this as the beginning part, and then I'll switch over to the screen share to start the presentation.
Okay, you're online now.
Okay.
So don't say that you want to
Don't tell any secrets. How do I share this link? Or what's the link to share? Is it?
I'm gonna.
Okay.
So, but if you want to invite people to the actual hangout there, and then you have the link.
Cool. I was just going to tweet it out.
Yes. But give the link of the YouTube page. It's easier. I mean, you can give both, but it's more likely that people will.
Okay. So how do I find the YouTube page? Is it?
Is that you just tell them to go on the Smithsonian mobile channel, and they should see it like on the front. So I just youtube.com/user/Smithsonian mobile.
Okay. On Smithsonian. Oh, there we go. Live now. Boom. Oh, okay. Are we gonna start exactly on time? Okay. It's all good. All right. Adriel. Oh, great.
And I followed some of you. So you're in Florence, right?
Huh?
You with the Florence
no,
surrounding the conference? Or?
I wasn't in Florence. I was at the Beijing and Hong Kong one in December.
Yes. That's very, very wonderful tweets.
My tweets, yes.
Yeah, you look like you're having some fun. I'm curious what you're up to. So.
Yeah. No, it was a fun time. I mean, and I was just at the Baltimore one, but just for like a day.
Yeah, I was there.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I was sad
Oh, word.
And the whole time, which was nice and exhausting.
Yeah, Baltimore is a beautiful city too.
Yes and no. I'm from Baltimore. They're pretty thorough.
Yeah.
Understanding of the city. I mean, it's interesting. I spend a lot of time. I sort of split my time between there and the state these days. So, but it is definitely interesting. I mean, it's pretty amazing stuff that's going on. But it's a difficult city. That brings challenges. Yeah. Do you get up there a lot?
No, I mean, so I moved to DC for this position in June.
Where'd you come from?
I was living in Beijing, and then
yeah, I didn't realize that.
And then before that, I was in New York, and so but I'm from the Bay Area.
That gives you great perspective.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I think what I appreciated about at least what I saw at Baltimore was kind of some of the stuff that I was looking for in DC that was harder to find.
Like
I think like I spent most of my time living in the Bay Area, like in West Oakland.
Yeah.
And so you get a mix of local communities and local art.
Yeah, right. That's right.
And then also this city trying to more of a global destination.
Yeah.
And so I mean it's a very conflicted dynamic, but
yes, it is.
But I think at the same time, and DC there's definitely also that dynamic of gentrification, but it's weird because in DC it's a national gentrification. It's not so. I mean, there's a local gentrification for sure because you have like the boutiques and the restaurants opening up, but who they're catering to is such a different kind of. I think there's such a different perspective.
Yeah.
It's maybe even more of like a global kind of gentrification.
Local stuff.
Yeah.
No, it's interesting because I can't think of any rest where it's two cities which are such distinctly different characters.
Yeah.
That now they're running the commuter trains on the weekends. That just started, so $7 and you can go back and forth. It's really interesting. So fun, but there's a lot happening in Baltimore. It's really there's a lot of challenges too. I guess
Yeah.
There really are, and I mean, I sort of that's like my artistic home. Baltimore. So,
yeah, and I just was on a grant jury panel and got to take a look at local Baltimore artists and kind of some of their ideas that they're hoping to get funded. And yeah, I mean, it's just I think that the fact that it has this dynamic, but at the same time, it's being addressed very directly by
Definitely, yeah.
It's pretty cool. I think in DC it's like you have an art scene out here, but it's almost like you kind of have to choose, like do you want to be a part of like this establishment and be, like within like kind of like the Smithsonian kind of National Gallery of Art scene, or like a more local base, kind of small.
There's a big connection in DC with people from the maker community coming out of Arlington.
Oh, word.
Is big.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of, so there's kind of that whole thing going on to like Artisphere.
Yeah.
So that's actually pretty strong, but absolutely a lot of that with names and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was just at Artisphere. So it's a nice space.
Yeah, they're trying real hard there, but Baltimore, it's very doctory about art and art Baltimore.
Mm-hmm.
You're kidding. I mean, it's really interesting. I'm trying to talk Pat Moran, she did like all the casting for John Waters, The Wire, and all that stuff. I've been trying to talk her into doing a museum presentation about collaboration, because that whole scene, people who work together since high school, I mean, like incredible loyalty and time-based relationships. And I think it really set a precedent for the city of Baltimore as far as collaboration goes, and certainly like Lamp City and Collective and all that kind of stuff. It just, I see more of that there. That's my training. That kind of. So, it's pretty funny. But I do wish she would do the panel discussion sometime. I don't know if she's totally comfortable with that.
Yeah, we can start. Yeah, let's begin. Let me send the tweets out so people.
Yeah, is there somebody connected to the Hangouts?
What's that?
You can see somewhere here 12 viewers.
Okay, cool. The 12 viewers that just saw a photo of my fiance on my other screen. Sorry, lovely. All right. Hello there, people tuning in from the interwebs. I think this is the first Google Hangout I've been a part of that actually, like, we got the tech situated before the start time. Hope you enjoyed this side conversation about Baltimore and DC. No, I think it was quite interesting. So actually here, I know I want to kind of, there we go. Hello there. Hello folks. I'll do the screen share soon, but I just wanted to kind of open it up real quick. But yeah, let me send out one more little tweet just to get folks really going. Boom. It begins now. Use tech. What are other like hashtags I can use to muse web? Muse. Yeah. On picture of museums. Tag. Boom. All right. Let us begin. All right. Great. So. It's kind of crazy. My name is Adriel Luis. I am a curator of digital and emerging media at the Smithsonian Asian Pacific American Center, and I actually did a Welcome Wednesday talk, I think, kind of within the first couple of months that I got in, and so it's kind of cool to jump in a little bit, like half a year later, and kind of just check in with everybody here in this forum and also in this forum. But yeah, as a curator of digital and emerging media at the Smithsonian Asian Pacific American Center, when I introduce my title, my very long and wordy title, I often get some confused looks, partly because a lot of people don't know that the Smithsonian has an Asian Pacific American Center, and then once we kind of get past establishing that fact, then it's like, what the hell is a curator of digital and emerging media? And as the first and only person with that title at the Smithsonian thus far, I think that when I first got here this past June, not too many people really like knew what that means or like what the implications of that is. And so for about the past almost year, I've hadn't had the chance to kind of refine my explanation of what that title is. And I think essentially the way I see it is the scope of all or, and I think a lot of people get caught up with the term digital because it's like the first kind of thing, but really I think the emerging media aspect is a lot more interesting, because then we're talking about stuff that can be online or offline, stuff that can be on a computer screen or off of a computer screen, and also kind of a realm of analog stuff that I also like. And I think at a recent talk I did, there was somebody who kind of criticized my generation and I, saying that we millennials are not into physical objects. And that was the first time I heard a claim, I think, along the lines of that. And so today I kind of wanted to talk about specifically what it means to work at a unit that is not a museum at the Smithsonian, and what collecting means for a non-collecting unit, and then kind of branch off from there. Cool? Cool. All right, so I'm going to switch over to the screen share now, and I'm hoping I do not break it, as I often do. Boom. All right, and then let me full screen this one time. Hold on. Okay. I cannot. Can you tell me when I'm hovering over the correct one? This one. This one. This one. Oh no! Of course not. Okay. Let me. Okay. I'm sorry, lovely. I'm gonna have to bust you out in front of everybody. There we go. Do slideshow. All right. I like to claim to be a techie-ish person, but when it comes to Microsoft products, I am completely unable to function. All right. So here we go. All right. So yeah, let's start off by talking about the Smithsonian Asian Pacific American Center, right? I think so. When I mention it, I think that the first kind of association that people make is that, oh, we must be along the similar lines as like the National Museum of the American Indian, the National Museum of African American History and Culture, and in many ways we are. You know, our focus is on scholarship of Asian Pacific American studies, particularly within the Smithsonian and also in the museum world. But there are a little bit of some differences between us and some of these other cultural-based spaces, and I kind of wanted to talk a bit about that. I think kind of the most glaring one is encountered with our most frequently asked question, which is, how do we visit you? How do we visit Smithsonian APA? And in the past, we've been around for 15 years, and in the past we've kind of just answered like, well, you kind of can't unless we have an exhibition up at a museum or if we have a public event. And so part of my role and why I came in this past June was to kind of shift the dynamic of our space so that our answer could be a bit different. And so just a little bit of a rundown of kind of what we're working with. So the Smithsonian is known as kind of like this Disneyland of like nerdery, right? Like we have like our museums, we have our zoo, we have our research centers, but essentially it's a destination. It's a thing that you can find on a Google map. For us, we do not have a physical space. Also, the Smithsonian is known as like this huge ecosystem of people. I think we have like 6,000 people working in or around the Smithsonian. For us, we have a small staff of about 6, 7 on a good day. We'll have 7 people in the office, including our intern. And then also the Smithsonian is known for, what, like 137 million objects. And we are a non-collecting unit. So out of those millions and millions of things, we have nay, right? Like we hardly have closet space in our little cubicle farm in the building that we're in. And so with all that, I think that in the past we've seen this as a great limitation, right? Like the kind of what we acquire when we first come into the Smithsonian. When any unit is built in the Smithsonian, there's almost this this pre-written expectation that the goal at some point, whether realistic or not, is to have a museum in the mall. And now we're living in a time where people are consuming media in very different ways. People are thinking about museums in very different ways. And so for a unit like Smithsonian APA, which doesn't even have the legislation passed for funding to begin to be got for a museum, we're in a really interesting time where we can kind of think about things a little bit differently. And so these three dynamics of not having a physical space, having a small staff, and being a non-collecting unit, to me actually means that there are endless possibilities. For us, it really means that we can kind of rethink what it means to be a museum, what it means to build a museum, right? And so I kind of wanted to just start off by giving you a little tour of the Smithsonian through Smithsonian APA's eyes, and then share some of our ideas. Try to keep it pretty short, and then from there we can kind of take some questions online and also within this massively packed room here. You guys can't see internet. It's just like so much, just hardly room to breathe. All right, so so this is an image taken from the time of the Chinese Exclusion Act, the Transcontinental Railroad, and I think that so the reason why I'm showing you this image is because I think it's very iconic in terms of what people imagine when they think of the Smithsonian Asian Pacific American Center. The assumption is that our exhibitions should and always will take place in the National Museum of American History because it's kind of the most obvious space in terms of being like, okay, well, there's going to be objects and stories about Asian Americans or by Asian Americans. And it's very similar too with Asian American studies in university. We kind of orbit around this narrative where there's stories that are very obviously associated with Asian American and Asian Pacific American experience. And so for us, in our rethinking of museums, the first thing that we kind of need to do as Smithsonian APA is sort of re-examine what Asian American studies is, and by extension, what ethnic studies, what cultural studies, what humanities is in many senses, right? And so, for example, if we stick with the National Museum of American History, we also have this gown by Jason Wu, a Taiwanese-American fashion designer. This is Michelle Obama's inaugural gown, and it's on display in the First Lady's gallery. We also have this image of Muhammad Ali that is in the collections of the National Museum of African American History and Culture. Now, with this museum that's being built right now, they're currently in this process of transitioning from a non-collecting unit to a collecting unit. And so I met up with some of the curators there, and we were thinking that it would be really cool to be able to open the museum with a tour specifically around Asian Pacific American experience within this African American narrative, right? And so, for example, we have this Life magazine cover of Muhammad Ali. There's obviously no photos of Asian Americans in this. It does not say the word Asian or Asian American on this cover. Possibly the photo was taken by an Asian American, but this is an example of an item that at first glance you wouldn't associate it with APA history and culture, but then when you examine the context of Muhammad Ali, him coming out of jail, which is what this magazine cover is featuring, then we can start talking about the civil rights movement. Why did he go to jail? Because he refused to go to war in Vietnam. Why did he refuse to go to war in Vietnam? Because he made numerous speeches about seeing Vietnamese people as brothers, finding a kinship with them in a way that he didn't with some people in the United States. We start to talk about conversations during the civil rights era that really jump-started this idea of solidarity among people of color, and it has huge implications about the ways that people in America saw people in Vietnam, and by extension the way that they saw Vietnamese refugees, Asian Americans, and Asians in general. Then we go down to the Hirshhorn, and we see an artist named Yayoi Kusama, who is a Japanese artist, born in Japan, currently lives in Japan, identifies as Japanese, but spent several years living in New York City. And so as Smithsonian APA, our job is to contextualize an artist like this, or like Ai Weiwei, who also spent time living in New York, and examine, well, if this artist is identified by the art world as Asian and not Asian American, yet they spent time living in the United States, how long do you need to live in the US before you're considered Asian American? If you create art that maybe you created an art piece in Beijing but is influenced by experiences that you had in New York City, is that not part of an American experience. And so these are ways that we're examining museums like Hirshhorn, like Freer Sackler, like the National Portrait Gallery and American Art Museum, looking at artists not only who are of Asian descent and have like a citizenship or a green card, but folks who have been influenced, whose work has been informed by American experiences, whether they're direct experiences that they had or things that they experienced back at home in Asia that still speaks to an American narrative. Right here at the Air and Space Museum, we have this image of Amelia Earhart landing in Oakland after the first direct flight from the mainland, from Hawaii to the mainland. And this was during a time before Hawaii was a state, and it was a campaign for America to really see Hawaii as part of the American imagination. And so once again, we have an image not of an Asian American, probably not taken by an Asian American, but of a moment that speaks volumes about experiences of Pacific Islander and Asian immigrants. And so when we kind of look at this wider scope of what APA studies is and how Smithsonian APA relates to the Smithsonian, then we start to see that actually some of the most iconic images, some of those most elemental pieces of the Smithsonian relate to Smithsonian APA. We have Nanjum Pike's Electronic Highway, which is in the American Art Museum, and you'll see it on many brochure and postcard that kind of represents the Smithsonian, and he was a Korean-American artist. We have Bao Bao the panda at the National Zoo, which, you know, we could argue whether or not Bao Bao is an Asian-American animal, but you know, when we look outside of the scope of just a zoological approach to Bao Bao, then we start seeing things like how panda diplomacy has shaped relationships between China and the U.S. and what that means for Chinese Americans like me. What does it mean when people come all the way to D.C. to experience something that would not have happened had there not been some kind of relationship built through the Cold War, built through Nixon and Kissinger going to China, eventually resulting in this really cute panda with a panda cam, right? And so, what does this all mean for Smithsonian APA, and what does it mean for museums in general? Well, for us, I think we wanted to get to a point, we got to a point where we realized that as a small unit, as a unit that if we ever do have a museum in the mall, won't be for another probably decade or so, do we want to really exist in the public imagination only after we have this huge building built, or do we want to start being proactive about the ways that we engage with the public? And for us, it was the latter. And really what it means is to kind of step outside of this aspiration to be compared to the Natural History Museum or the American History Museum, and really building a new concept of what a museum can be, at least within the Smithsonian. And so for us, that meant that we would look at stories less from an anthropological approach and more from an aspirational approach. Because we're a museum that represents a community, we have the ability to not only speak on things that have happened, but also engage audiences and engage the public to look at ways that we can examine history so that 20, 30 years down the road, a narrative is shifted. Rather than being a gallery of artifacts, we want to be an engine for creators. And so we also just, if we are going to be a museum of art, for example, and we're working with digital artists working in digital space, perhaps we could foster the type of art that we would want to display at an Asian American art museum at some point in the future. Essentially, what this all means is that we want to be a museum of the future versus a museum of the past. Not necessarily meaning that we don't explore history, that we don't explore canonical moments like the Japanese-American internment or the Transcontinental Railroad, but that we look at these moments less in a vacuum and more as a narrative that's growing, part of a community that's still trying to gain a space in the grand American narrative. And how are ways that we can re-examine stories that maybe everybody's kind of glossed over in their history classes in 3rd grade, but how can we shift it so that it's more representative of the community, so that it's more inclusive of groups that in the past have not been glossed over. I'm speaking specifically about Southeast Asian Americans, South Asian Americans, Pacific Islanders, LGBT communities. And essentially, what we're looking at is going from a traditional museum to a cultural laboratory. I know I got my top and bottom thing switched on this one, I'm sorry. But yeah, and so what that kind of all comes down to is if the Smithsonian Asian Pacific American Center is to be a museum and we don't want to wait 15 to 20 years, we're really looking at us being the Smithsonian's first digital-born museum. And that could mean that we exist as a website, as well as a series of pop-up spaces, as well as a series of public events and programs. Basically, how do we create a forum where we can be open, where we can shoot for the same goals that museums go for, without necessarily centering this vision around a brick-and-mortar museum in the National Mall. And so just a couple of quick examples about ways that we've started moving towards this direction. Some of you may know that in February we opened Beyond Bollywood at the Natural History Museum, the National Museum of Natural History. And when we opened it, we also opened a digital exhibition on the same day with Google Cultural Institute. And this was the first Google Cultural Institute exhibition from the Smithsonian that opened in concurrence with an actual physical exhibition. And for us, that was really powerful because even though we've seen a lot of Indian American families come to the National Museum of Natural History since Beyond Bollywood opened, there are also a lot of folks who don't have access to coming out here in DC, whether the plane ticket's too expensive, whether there's a language barrier, whether they're not even based in the US. And so by offering about a quarter of the pieces that are at the physical exhibition for greater context, for people to be able to zoom in and read deeper into the stories, we allowed for this digital exhibition to be a companion to the physical one, as opposed to being a substitute or kind of a makeshift kind of a website. And I think that it's actually helped bring more people to the museum rather than kind of feed into the fear that a lot of museums have, which is if we build a digital exhibition that people won't come out to the museums. This coming month in May, we're also celebrating Asian Pacific American Heritage Month with a series of events that are really looking to use May as a platform for discussion rather than just kind of a month that exists in a vacuum. And so one of the projects that I'm curating is called A Day in the Life of Asian Pacific America. We're using this on one end to shift the idea of a digital exhibition being one that can be crowdsourced, being one that people can take photos and upload through Flickr and Instagram to share, and also to kind of shift the idea of what an Asian Pacific American experience can be. And so essentially on May 10th, we're calling on folks to submit photo essays, short videos about their experience in Asian Pacific America. And we're getting folks submitting all the way from California, from DC, New York, the Deep South, as well as we have somebody submitting from Manila, Philippines, somebody submitting from Fukushima, Japan. And the idea is to also generate this understanding of Asian Pacific American experience being something that can exist as like expats, for example, or international students, things like that. On the same day, on May 10th, we're also doing a Wikipedia edit-a-thon. This is a multi-city event which is taking place at the American Art Museum out here in DC, also at a space called Coalition for Queens in New York, as well as in LA, in Austin, and I think we're starting one in the Bay Area as well. And so this is the first Asian Pacific American focused Wikipedia edit-a-thon, and basically the idea is that right now on Wikipedia there's kind of a same representation of Asian American experience as we see in like a lot of museums, kind of the more canonical, well-known issues. But when we start talking about Thai Americans, for example, or Burmese American experiences, or Pacific Islanders, then the information starts to get really sparse. And so we're doing this national event to kind of up the ante, and also is playing into a larger series of Wikipedia edit-a-thons that the Smithsonian is doing. And the whole message that we're looking to convey with this step forward is that the canonical Asian American history and culture experience as we know it does not have to exist as just that. You know, the difference between a nuance and a classic is recognition. And I think the reason why some of the ethnicities that are not East Asian are considered nuanced, considered not well known, is because the storytellers could kind of do a better job. And so as storytellers, as a museum, it's kind of our role to do that. And so kind of wanted to just do a time check. I could share a couple more things, but I'm not sure if we want to. Okay, cool. So I'll just share a couple of the collaborations that we're working on, some of the non-Smithsonian items that we're looking to collect. And so basically, we are a non-collecting unit, and so when we do an exhibition like Beyond Bollywood at the National Museum of Natural History, for example, it's a bunch of items that we have acquired through the National Museum of American History or through Air and Space or whatever relevant museum, and then we present it as an exhibition. But not really, none of the items are really, collected by the Smithsonian Asian Pacific American Center. But as a curator of digital and emerging media, that kind of changes, because now we don't need to talk about renting warehouse space. We can talk about having a cloud-based collection. We can talk about having a collection in my hard drive, which I do have right now. And we also can engage this great community. Historically, Asian Pacific Americans have had a hard time gaining entry in mainstream media. And so because of that, there's not really a wealth of published books or television shows or box office films. And with the emergence of digital media in the last decade or so, we've really been able to see more and more Asian Pacific American artists and people gain a presence through YouTube, through Tumblr, and things like that. And so as a curator of digital and emerging media, one of the really interesting dilemmas that I get to kind of tackle is, like, what do I do with an artist that I find on Tumblr? What happens when an artist creates something on Adobe Illustrator, uploads it to Tumblr, because while she was creating this piece, she saw it on her Tumblr page as the frame, right? Like, it almost seems like it ruins the authenticity of printing out this JPEG and then framing it and putting it up on a wall. We kind of lose some artistic intent. The same way that a lot of traditional artists feel like they lose their artistic intent when a photograph that was meant to be shown in a huge display is, like, scanned and put as a JPEG on a website. And so for us, this is kind of where our first step of building our digital museum comes into play. Right now I'm building the website component of it, and we're building our collection section, which will be less of kind of like this huge data dump of stuff and more of an exhibition on its own. For example, the items I showed you from the different Smithsonian museums will be on display, and they will be contextualized around an Asian Pacific American narrative. And then we also have a lot of ways that we can use our kind of Smithsonian platform to pull up emerging artists who don't really have another huge platform to be able to present their work. So for example, we're working with another digital museum called the Center for Art and Thought, which focuses specifically on LGBT Filipino experiences across the Filipino diaspora. And so this is an artist named Miguel Ibanez, and this artist is a film artist, but also one that does most of the work on, like, YouTube and Vimeo and digital platforms. And so we're collaborating with this grassroots museum to present this work and hopefully bring it to a wider audience. This is Kathy Jitnil-Kijner. I'm sorry, Kathy, if I said your name incorrectly. She is a spoken word artist based in the Marshall Islands. And one of the reasons why I'm really compelled by this artist is because when we say Marshall Islands, especially in the United States, oftentimes the direct association is with the nuclear testing. Oftentimes it's forgotten that there's a community there. There had been a community there, and there's a community that continues to thrive while being affected by all the Cold War things that happened. And so Kathy is an artist who speaks on some of these issues, but at the same time, really the narrative is about bringing out experiences of people who are living in the Marshall Islands, talking about stories and ways that people experience life beyond just that, just the nuclear testing perspective. And third, we worked with a small organization in Philadelphia called Laos in the House. This past couple of weeks ago was the Lunar New Year for South and Southeast Asia, and that was a great opportunity to bring out narratives that are often not really glanced on. So for example, Nepal celebrated a Lunar New Year, so did Burma, so did Laos. And so we worked with Laos in the House as well as the Smithsonian Castle to proliferate these these little graphics to just kind of share with the general public the fact that there is a South and Southeast Asian Lunar New Year, and that this is something that we are really looking to bring into the fold of this grand Asian Pacific American narrative. That's it for now. I'm currently working on some of those projects that I just showed you, and if you have any questions about, or if we want to kind of go into a larger discussion about collecting versus non-collecting museums without space, I'd be happy to kind of talk about that as well. Should I like switch it back over to the cam, or does the internet like staring at this animated GIF of me? Yeah, let's flip it back around. Oops, I'm getting. So yeah, I could answer a question or something while I try and make this less. If anybody has any questions? Oh, there we go. Boom. Okay. And it's like the 4th time I said boom this hour. Yeah.
How challenging is getting the image rights permissions, considering that you have to go to all these different places?
It definitely is a challenge. So the question. Yeah. Yeah. So the question was, as a non-collecting unit, and especially building a digital platform, how challenging is it to get the image rights? And it kind of varies from museum to museum. And I think the challenge has been less resistance and more of the fact that some museums don't really have a method for throwing something up on digital space. And so, for example, I think it's actually a bit more difficult with Smithsonian museums than with the general public, and I'll kind of speak on both of them. And so, for example, with the Smithsonian, if I want to feature a piece from, like, is this jumping up and down for you guys? I'm sorry if it is. Okay. Yeah, just close your eyes if I'm freaking you out right now. So, for example, if I want to feature in our collection section an item from the National Portrait Gallery, then I need to approach the curator there. And then if I want to feature something from Air and Space, then I need to approach the curator there. And so on that end, it almost, sometimes it seems like being a part of the Smithsonian doesn't really give me that much of a leg up. But at the same time, I think that what our approach is doing is something that can actually feed into all these different museums and help expand the experience. And so, for example, the greatest concern is that, well, if you throw up a high-resolution image of this piece that's in our galleries, then people won't come and look at it. And for us, we're really less concerned with like being able to zoom in on something and spin it around, and more of like showing this piece as a story that would never necessarily be told at this particular museum. So, for example, the image of Amelia Earhart that I showed you, it's there's a lot of information on Amelia Earhart at the Air and Space Museum, but it's not necessarily Air and Space's job to contextualize it around Asian American immigration stories. That's our job. And so by kind of joint presenting this collection item, we're able to I think really enhance this idea of what the Air and Space Museum can speak to, and the hope is that in the future, once we kind of start seeding our collection section, that people will come out to the different museums and actually have an eye out for things that could be kind of in the scope of Asian Pacific American history and culture. With the general public, it's been a little bit easier, and part of it is because as a curator around digital and emerging media, I'm working with a lot of emerging artists, a lot of young artists who are very used to creating something today and then uploading it tomorrow or tonight. And so there's less of a concern about whether or not somebody's going to download it and print it out and sell it on the street or something. And I've been talking with curators from other museums, including like Neil Stimler at the Met, and we've been talking about, well, maybe the approach to collecting a digital item is something that is less similar to acquiring something physically, right? And so for the Smithsonian, and for me, maybe it's less about actually giving them like the Smithsonian contract and being like, we are acquiring this, and more about helping steward these artists towards Creative Commons, so that once it's available for the Smithsonian to use in the curation, other museums can use as well. And I think kind of helping foster a digital museum community as opposed to following the template of a traditional one is another way that we can kind of remove ourselves from this framework that I think a lot of non-brick and mortar Smithsonian spaces kind of feel trapped in. Any other questions?
I'm wondering if you are looking at or using iTunes U at all, and I'm wondering what your most successful social media platform is.
Yeah, I mean, so the questions was if we've used iTunes U, and the other was what our most successful social media platform has been.
What works for you, what doesn't work for you.
Yeah. Well, so in terms of iTunes U, we haven't really examined that specifically, but I think part of that will go into this expanding scholarship that we want to.
Okay, you're live.
Okay. Hey, I'm back. I hope you didn't leave.
Okay, yeah.
Some people left. They're like,
They said whatever.
Okay. I'm back. Okay. This is so pretend that like just like this jumping image of me is like a Namjoon Pike piece. So the other, sorry, I'm grabbing my charger right now. That's why you can't see me. Okay. The other question was around successful social media, and so as digital curator, I think one of the assumed roles that I ended up taking on was also kind of being the social media person, and so in between curating and stuff, I've also been like updating Facebook and Twitter, but at the same time, one of the really big tasks that one of the really big projects that I've been working on is our website, our digital platform. And so because of that, it was kind of like right now, even though we're maintaining our social media, at the end of the day, it's not really leading to something of substance the way that I would like it to. And so we wanted to make sure that we're not like completely out of the eye, but at the same time, you know, that's something that I would say is probably like a third or fourth tier priority. With that said, I think the most successful one thus far, I think, has been Twitter. And I think part of it is because it allows for us to, well, once we decided that we weren't going to try to follow the footsteps of brick and mortar museums for our social media, I think that's really when we started seeing a lot more growth and engagement. Twitter really allows for you to be a person or not, to be a building or not. With Facebook, we still kind of like, we still have like a place page, and so it like says our hours, which is like 24 hours because we're digital, and it like has like this many people have been here. But I think that kind of still kind of tries to box us into a frame of a brick and mortar, and so it's still been a little bit difficult with Facebook. But I think in the future I'm really interested in building up our Instagram stuff. But I think that's something that's going to be like a lot of our social media stuff that we're really going to start focusing on once we actually have an endpoint for people to be able to get to. And yeah, I think Instagram is great because it's more visual. It's and it's also, and I think it's also something that engages more young people. It engages more people of color, and engages a more global community, and I think for those reasons, it's really compelling for me. Do you have any other questions or online? Should I check like the tweets? Yeah.
How are you doing with language on the website?
Now that's a really good question. So the question is how I'm dealing with language on the website. So we're starting off with English, the language I'm most familiar with. But yeah, I mean, I've had some talks with folks who are involved, for example, with the Smithsonian like transcription project and things like that. And like that's a really unique kind of project that I think SmithsonianAPA has, in that we're really looking to be an accessible museum, especially to communities that typically don't come out to museums. There's pretty low turnout in terms of Asian Pacific Americans who come out to physical museum spaces. I think part of that is because of location. Part of that is because Asia in general doesn't have doesn't traditionally have like a museum culture. Like right now in China, they're like popping up museums like Starbucks is, but it's still kind of following a Western frame. And so this kind of goes into the whole idea of like rethinking a museum by going all the way down to the heart of like what is it that museums are trying to do, and do we need to follow the template of a traditional museum in order to accomplish that? And for us, we're talking about cultural diplomacy, we're talking about storytelling, we're talking about things that you don't necessarily need a brick and mortar space. And so I think with our website, one of the hopes is that we're not too wordy in the first place. Part of that does require like kind of choosing media that we can actually get in large form, choosing moving image and stuff like that. And then the hope would also be to create a really dynamic multilingual website, so that when there is use of words, that folks are able to access it, and not just the challenge is that we don't want to fall into the trap of just providing Chinese, Japanese, and Korean. Like we want to make sure that the communities that typically are sidelined and marginalized get a voice, but that becomes difficult when there's not really a lot of resources to be able to and also it's almost impossible, right? Like there's dozens and dozens of languages in India alone, and so what does that mean for a space that's trying to accommodate all of that? And so I think our first level approach is to really build a website that's focused a little bit less on the words and more on telling stories through visuals, through and if we do use words, kind of keeping it brief as opposed to like really long essay style blog posts.
Something more about the and how you started, why.
Yeah. So the question was about the Wikipedia edit-a-thon, and it's one of the most one of the projects I'm most excited about for this coming month. And so the general approach to Asian Pacific American Heritage Month is that we're really using this month as kind of a coming out party in a sense of demonstrating Smithsonian APA's kind of new angle at ethnic studies and scholarship. And so, for example, Heritage Months are typically something where, we throw up a couple of events, McDonald's puts out a couple of commercials, everybody recognizes that, like Asian Americans exist, and then that's kind of it. And then like once the month is done, then it's kind of like, okay, well, we can't talk about Asians anymore or Asian Americans anymore. And so these projects, including the Wikipedia Editathon, the goal was to create events that could happen in May that would leave a more permanent impression and something that we could build on. And so besides the Editathon being a multi-city event where people will come to physical space as well as log in digitally and help edit and create articles, we also wanted to create a template. Like really the goal of this project is less on kind of filling Wikipedia with more content, which is something that we really do want to do, but more providing a framework so that, for example, in the future, if we wanted to do it again, or if a student organizer at a university that doesn't have a lot of resources around Wikipedia wanted to create something like this, that we would have something that they could follow along. And also hoping that this framework that we create is something that not just Asian Pacific Americans can use, but that folks in general who are interested in expanding Wikipedia or just information and scholarship in general could use, and then that when they look at this template, the kind of case study is APA history and culture. And so we felt like that would be a good way to kind of, use a backdoor entrance towards showing people and teaching folks about APA studies. Then we have a couple more minutes for like another question if anybody has one. Will not force it on you. Excuse me? Yeah. Yeah, so the question was around Google Cultural Institute. So if you're interested in checking out what the first one that we built, it's bit.ly/Beyond Bollywood, and yeah, I mean so working with Google Cultural Institute was pretty cool because again it was an ecosystem where Smithsonian APA could step in as a non brick and mortar unit, as a small staff, but be on the same platform as like Fleur Sackler and Guggenheim and and the Louvre. And so at first glance, we already are able to kind of come in and play in the same field as everybody else, which I think for us was a great step towards really establishing, the fact that even without a museum in the mall, we could really engage and be productive in this kind of a conversation. The next step that we're going with is building more digital exhibitions around Beyond Bollywood. And so one of the big challenges of an exhibition like Beyond Bollywood is the fact that it's an exhibition about a people, about a community, and it's a 5,000 square foot space, which is great, but you can't fit everything in there. And one of the main critiques that we get from the community and outside is like, oh, I went to this exhibition and you didn't include this person, or you didn't include this experience. And I think that's really where digital exhibitions are, we're able to come in, because, for example, Beyond Bollywood took like 5 to 7 years to curate. By the time the curation process was done, there was still all this time that we needed to like print out labels and set up the space and all that stuff. And so for physical exhibitions, it's very difficult to jump into a conversation while it's hot. With digital exhibitions, it becomes a lot easier. Rather than building an exhibition in years, we're talking about weeks or even days eventually. And so with the Google Cultural Institute, we will be launching kind of more nuanced projects. We're kind of taking note from the public comments about communities and experiences that were not addressed at the physical exhibition, and using that as kind of like different rabbit holes that we can follow and that we can digitally curate. And so over the course of the next year, we'll be throwing up more Google Art exhibitions around things like that. And then after that, I think we're still kind of exploring all these different platforms, including our own website. But in the meantime, I mean, the Cultural Institute has been really supportive and really great. And so it was really smooth working with them. All right, cool. So thank you for joining, everybody. If you want to follow along with what's happening with Smithsonian APA, we are Smithsonian APA on pretty much all the platforms: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Not on Tumblr yet, but we will be. And then my handle is Drizzle, DRZZL. Think about the way that it's raining outside in DC, except without the vowels. And yeah, and that's about it. Check out SmithsonianAPA.org. Right now we're like on temporary website status, but you know, I'm building it right now, and as the coder curator, I assure you we will be up quite shortly. Yeah. So thank you, everybody. Now I will end this. Bye.